This is the CW Spiral, a podcast run by three survivors of the CW's calling in 2022. We're your hosts, Sabrina Reed,
Michael Patterson.
And Reed Gaudens.
bringing you history about the network and the WB, the latest news and in-depth Sporterville discussions of the best and messiest shows to ever grace the small screen. Okay, so we do have some CW news for you guys. Not the CW news you've been waiting for, which is like premiere dates for the shows that have been filming. But if you are a fan of NASCAR, 100 Days to Indy will return for a season two in the spring of this year. So you have something to look forward to. It'll be 6 episodes in length. And like before, it's the road to the big race. I really don't have much else to share because I enjoyed the series, but I did not finish it. But if you are a sports fan, the CW really is trying to provide as much as they can for different sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, I tell you, nothing surprises me with this network anymore, but that was a genuine pleasant surprise because that kind of became a little show that could. It only had a short run and its rating started well and then kind of went the other way. But like, you know what? I'm so happy just to see that and renewal on the CW. It feels like a while since we've seen that because we knew the network TV season was going to come and go with some renewals and cancellations. And unfortunately, there were more cancellations than renewals, but we got our scripted shows at least for this season. It's nice to see the CW investing in some of the shows they've brought. Oh, this Next Star era has brought with it, to give it a second season. I know you were a fan of the show when it started and you were rooting for it, so you were the first person I thought of, and I was like, oh, Sabrina will be happy with that. Again, I can add no context to this because I don't even know anything about the show other than its basic premise. So, I'm just happy that it'll be back for another season, at least for all the fans of it who get to enjoy it for, I guess, another 6 episodes.
Yes, I feel like it's going to end up being a staple on the CW because they are doing more properties involving racing,
Hmm.
because they have the Infinity series coming at some point. Again, I have no idea how that
Hmm.
lane of the sports world is, but I feel like it's really nice to be able to have that on the CW. It is a lane that we appreciate more than the golf. Um,
Very much
uh,
so.
I think for us, the racing, the college basketball and football, and inside the NFL were the right moves to make. The golfing, mm. But
It's there.
more power to that journey, I guess. We just won't be on it with them.
Yeah, we can watch it or keep up with it from afar.
I know. I will say though, the commercials for them are really nice. The ads for the CW when they run them for the shows, there's a crispness to them
Hmm.
that it really does make you want to tune in to things that you might not have tuned into previously.
It's very attention grabbing. The marketing is marketing, certainly.
Which is why I'm excited for how Superman and Lois is going to land when they start
Hmm.
doing the promo push for it, because we've seen how heavy they've been going in promotion for wild cards. And it'll be so fun and interesting to see how they do that for the final season of Superman and Lois.
I want cinematic posters every week, I tell you. The real opportunity with a show like that.
Yes, and it is the last season, which I mean, this is why we've been keeping up with the cast too, because we were wanting to know like who are we going to be seeing in these promos, who are we going to be seeing in these 10 episodes. So it was great to learn that the Irons family will be in the final season. They will return.
This is becoming a running theme because every week I'm like, I hope we hear more about this character. I hope we hear something about that character. And now this week it's the Irons, which is just wonderful because their story was so important in season one. Of course, the introduction of John Henry and then the revelation at the end of season one that Natalie was still alive. And she became such an important character in season two onwards. And the two of them really, really felt like part of that whole Kent Lane Irons family dynamic. And I love the friendships they've all concocted between John Henry and Clark and Lois and Natalie and the boys. It's just been a lovely family to watch. So it wouldn't have felt right. I know we have the Kents and the Lanes, that's important, but it wouldn't have felt right not to at least see the Irons for a little while in the final season. Um, Yes, Taylor Buck posted that she was back on set day one wearing Natalie's signature jacket. So, of course, the internet went into meltdown. It was like, yes, the Irons are back. The Irons are back. Which is just a wonderful. I'm a big fan of the Irons and I really, really enjoy their stories, especially since on another show, John Henry could have been a season one anti-hero or antagonist and just left there. But he became such a like fabric of the show. I love him. I love Wole Parks. I love Taylor Buck, and I'm so happy that they'll both be back for at least some episodes in the final season.
The story grew into something that was very heartwarming. I
Hmm.
remember watching season one and being a little scared because of the premise. Michael, you and I watch soap operas. We know how this goes down. When you
Yep.
find out that it's the her Lois's husband from an alternate reality, you're like, does this mean we should be in fear of Clark and Lois? Like, what's happening here? But I mean, it is great that they didn't go in that direction because it expanded into a family drama that encompassed them being able to have them be a part of the family. There, if we move into the lane of like things that we wish for the characters. For the Irons, I really want them to have a solid arc in the episodes that they're in.
Yeah, family is what the Irons are all about, and I would love that they hoped fulfilling end to their story because, like we said, their arc was one of the most emotional hearts of seasons one and two, and they maybe didn't get enough attention in season three. So I hope at least in the episodes they're in, they get some fulfilling storytelling to bring their story to a close.
Fingers crossed. And I feel that way about the Cushings too. I want to update on Lana and being the mayor, that situation with Kyle and Chrissy about the baby. And then for Miss Attitude, I really want her to find peace.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we need to, the Jordan and Sarah relationship really needs to find peace, whether that means they get back together or just to finally decide we're better off as friends. We got to stop going around in circles, but I wish the two of them well and hope they have a happy ending. Um, Lana, Mayor, Queen, I hope we get to see her just like absolutely have the time of her life running Smallville because it's what she deserves. She deserves a happy ending. And I hope that Kyle finds the peace he's been looking for because there's been a lot of struggle and a lot of unrest with him over the course of the 3 seasons he's been in. I hope he's respectful to everyone who's around him because Kyle can be disrespectful when he wants to be, but I just hope he finds some kind of peace and hopefully Chrissy will be in it so that she can also find some kind of peace as well because she spent an awful long time kind of trying to fit in a town that she's been part of for so long. So I wish them nothing but the best. I love this cast so much.
I know. And then one more, the sweet baby, Sophie. Attention.
Yes, yes,
Just
yes.
attention.
We want
That's
people to
it.
remember that this poor child exists once in a while.
Yes, because her family doesn't often. So,
No.
oh man. If hopefully she's in it actually.
Yeah, justice for Sophie. We need at least one cameo appearance. Just have her
I
stand in
know.
the background, even if she doesn't say anything.
Well, that'll be a point that we'll make in our finale review if we didn't see Sophie once in 10 episodes.
We will have complaints.
Yes. But ooh, okay, before we hop into Ride, you guys, I did want to make a note, which I feel like most of you know, but as far as like the CW lineup, there's just so many shows. So we won't be covering everything once the network really gets rolling in terms of its content. And by that I mean like the dramas. Like the comedies you kind of expected us not to be a part of, but the dramas are going to be coming back significantly. I think there might end up being some crossover, and between y'all and us, it's just too much content. So we will be covering Ride and Wild Cards all the way through. Obviously, we're doing Superman and Lois. Uh, we won't be talking about the All-American universe, really. There might be times in which we pop into it. It really just depends on what happens on the show. And then Sight Unseen and Joan, we're on the fence about. And it really just depends on when it lands on the calendar for the CW because we don't know when they're coming. And if they come smack dab in the middle of everything else we're doing, they outside of discussing the series premieres, they might get benched for a little bit, just so
Mhm.
y'all are aware.
Yeah, no one loves consuming content more than the three of us do, but like it depends. Obviously, we have to factor in when the shows come, how much we'll be juggling together, and just how much time we have in a week to consume all of that content. Like Sabrina said, the staples will of course continue to be covered. We love wild cards. We now love Ride. We're on that journey, and of course, the iconic Superman and Lois will get the send off that it deserves. It all kind of just depends where the rest of the chips fall and how many shows we have to cover at a time. But of course, we'll be keeping up to date with all things CW Universe because, or the CW versus they tried to sell a few years ago, because that's what we do. We love this network very much.
Yeah, we just want to give you all a heads up just in case you don't see certain shows spoken
Sure.
about weekly on the pod. That is the reason why. Which I want there to be an embarrassment of riches. Like I just want there
Definitely.
to be so much content for everyone to be able to enjoy. Um, whether they're watching it or we're talking about it or we're watching and talking about it. It's just good to have that. It's just not something that we can keep up with.
Mm.
But moving into Ride. So we are once again on the horse, on the bull, I'm not really sure. To to try to see like what this family is dealing with. Like there was more discussion about the ranch. There was also like this gala-like event that took place on the ranch. That was really nice to see everybody gussied up. And it added a new dynamic for Cash because if you didn't know that like most sports, even with you being the athlete, you don't get to just do your sport and not have to schmooze with the people in charge. And Cash really didn't want to do that.
Yeah, this episode was quite eye-opening for me because, like I said before, shows like Ride wouldn't necessarily be on in my neck of the woods, so I wouldn't know all the backstory and stuff that goes into it. So it was nice to see that Cash had more of a we Cash is kind of a main character he is. I know this is very much a Missy and Isabel story, but Cash is there at the forefront as well, and we got to learn a lot about him this week, and that we've seen this kind of narrative in television before where someone is talented and good at the talent, but they don't want to do the whole like promotional and marketing level of it because they're quiet and that's just not who they are. And there was that, I feel like this was really quite an eternal struggle for Cash because he's always felt like he's been living in Austin's shadow, and Austin was so good at being that kind of like public figure. So much so that even now, like Frontier Jeans is still using his image to market them. So it was nice to see Cash struggle with that because we've already seen him struggle with how he's never going to live up to what Austin was. But this is a part of this is a part of the world, that world that he didn't necessarily want to live up to Austin because that's just not who he was. And I think that the episode was less about him trying to be Austin and more about other people seeing that he shouldn't have to be. And I think that's why it really resonated with me because Cash has kind of been someone who never really knew his place. He just knew what he was good at. And now there's been so much going on. He just doesn't know who he is kind of anymore. And this episode made him it confused him about, I don't even want to say it made him confronted because he was confronted by this idea, oh, this is what you should be, this is what you need to be. But by the end of the episode, he made other people say, no, actually, this is who I am. And the ones that mattered were like, you figured yourself out, Cash. And I like the fact that Isabel told him he's a bit more like his dad rather than Austin because I think he really needed to hear that.
Yes, that line made me really want to know more about Dusty.
Yeah.
Like what type of a man he was, presumably a good man with the way that Isabel talks about him. But it's nice to see that like it's not just the person who can do well in a social situation that should be lauded. It's also the person who understands that they need to do this, but it's not their personality and they're being honest about it too. I mean, in some ways I was like, Cash, it's part of the sport though. Like you
Oh,
don't
yeah.
necessarily have to like it, but you should be on your best behavior and you should attend, but you definitely should be you. And I think that moment, to skip to towards the end, I think that moment where, he is having a good time, he's loosened up, and then unfortunately crashes into the waiter and things break, and that rude man starts talking about the McMurray curse. It really showed the strength of character for Cash to stand up in front of everybody and say, well, like, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, we're not cursed. And I think it's really hard to work in an environment in which everyone is whispering about your family. Like they
Hmm.
don't necessarily want you to succeed, but they also want you to kiss the ring. And that's just
Hmm.
too much, especially if you're going to talk about his family to the side. Like it's already a tough situation to be, like you said, cast in Austin's shadow, but also just the shadow of what has happened to their family because of the sport being dangerous. And I liked that he was like, you know what, actually, we're going to talk about this because it's not okay that you feel comfortable joking about what's happened to my family.
Yeah, I really liked that moment as well because Cash got a chance to stand up for not just himself but his family. You're right about the whole idea that like obviously you need to strike a balance, and I feel that when Cash was there, dressed up, and he took that woman Barbara Sutton for a dance, that woman who was overseeing and who wanted the barn to be cleaned up, and was quite impressed by it. I feel like that was the perfect balance. Cash found where he could do what Austin did, but do it as himself, and he was really happy in that moment. But then we understandably just went full scale back to Cash, which again he should be allowed to do when that man said that horrible comment. Because we've known since the start of the series that there's been this kind of like aura around the McMurrays that people are kind of like awkward around them and they don't know what to say. But also on the other end of the front, there's been people quietly judging them, like the mayor's daughter, for example, although she's designed just to be a foil for a Missy. Um, but like there's been this kind of aura where people don't treat the Murrays with the respect they deserve. Like they are a legacy family, they are legends in this place, and they don't get that kind of love or attention that they deserve. Of course, Austin does because he's no longer with us, but the family that was left behind to pick up the pieces didn't. So I like the fact that Cash got to highlight who they are, what they've done, why they should still be respected, and just treat it with kindness because they're still grieving after all. It's only been a year since Austin died. I think that said spoke volumes to Cash's character because people can joke and say that he's a little rough around the edges or that he doesn't really care about things because he comes off as being very casual. But no, he does care a great deal, and I think seeing him stand up for his family like that was such an important moment for him.
It was, and I feel like it's also a different side of his personality that we got
Hmm.
to see. It is very family first on this show, and it's really nice. Which is kind of why I don't know how you felt, but when it was revealed that Barbara and Isabel hadn't actually spoken for 20 years, did you find that gap to be a bit long for them to be rekindling that friendship afterwards? And I understand Barbara not knowing how to talk about Isabel losing Dusty. But 20 years. And her son was back in her son was in the sport. Y'all never saw each other ever?
Yeah, that sounded a bit strange to me because I know we all know what it's like to lose touch with childhood best friends or younger best friends. Um, but like when you live in a town that small or an area that small, chances are you're going to run into them once in a while. And even if I'm not sure whether they're supposed to have run into each other, but even that, I've had this kind of conversation before then, because why did it take something like this to make them have the conversation? And also, I'm not entirely sure that woman was worthy of Isabel's friendship
Hmm.
because I know the fact that I agree with you. It's totally hard to approach someone when something like that happens if you haven't been in their life because it looks like you're just coming out of the word work now. But on the other hand, I'm sure Isabel would have liked to have heard from her former best friend when tragedy struck in her life. Maybe she could have leaned on her and formed reunited with her, reformed their friendship, is what I was trying to say. Um, but the fact that I know this was done for television purposes, but after Cash said what Cash needed to say and had that moment where all the attention was on him. Barbara was like, "Aren't you going to say anything about your son, Isabel?" And Isabel, icon, legend, and the moment. Isabel's like, "No, I think Cash said all he needed to say." Well, this woman was all like quite one-dimensional, and then you turned out actually no, wait, she's not that one-dimensional. She did come back. I was like, that we really need that moment. We could have had one of the men in the hats go like, instead of her. It was this whole episode was quite contradictory. Everything we were being told about Barbara was not what we were saying. Like she was
Hmm.
very rude to Isabel that time. It was like, "You've never let me down before, but there's a first time for everything." You would not talk to someone like that who was still grieving after the son died just a year ago. You wouldn't. You absolutely would not. So it was quite contradictory for me with the whole Barbara dynamic. I'm glad for Isabel that they've rekindled their friendship because she needs people in her life that she can talk to, and they did have some nice chemistry. I was like, if we saw more scenes of Barbara like this, I would have been her biggest fan. But it was just she was quite a contradictory character for me.
Yeah, I really wanted to like Barbara,
Hmm.
especially because of where she's positioned in the sport that they all have a family legacy tied to. Because she's a black woman, right? And like in
Hmm.
this space, in this sport that is predominantly white, and she is a leader. Like it really comes down to if Barbara doesn't like it, it's not happening. And like
Hmm.
so I was so intrigued by her, and I feel like the writing let her down as a character because it was like you said whiplash, right?
Yeah.
Where she's supposed to be Isabel's friend from 20 years ago who disappeared from her life because of what happened with Dusty, and she didn't know how to handle it. But then they also kind of wanted her to be one of those highbrow ladies who looks down on everybody because of her position that she has in their community. I was like, well, it can be both things, but she needs more nuance then. And I feel like the
Hmm.
20-year gap there really stole from what could have been a great maybe rekindling that made sense because I liked the scene. I just didn't like the context around the scene. And it really could have just been the man who was like, it was just a joke. He could have been the one that was like, aren't you gonna say anything? I don't know why it had to be Barbara.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like that would have maybe had more of an impact because, like, oh, Cash is talking to this man like this. He oversees everything. He runs everything. But at the same time, uh, I think it was all just about maybe so that there would be aftermath to it for Isabel. But like, there wasn't really that much aftermath. Isabel said her piece as she should have, and Barbara actually listened for a change. I know. I feel like you're right. They could have been two separate storylines because it. making Isabel or making Barbara a bit of a contradictory character only undermined the eventual result. Like I don't even know if we'll see Barbara again after this. Like I just don't know what it felt very episodic for me. And even if we do see Barbara, I feel like she'll be a more different kind of person now than she would be because she learned her lesson. But I'm like, it took her 20 years to learn that lesson, in an hour before this conversation, she still hadn't learned it. So I'm not really sure what they were doing. I did really like her. I have to credit the actress. She had such a charisma about her that you couldn't help but watch her on screen. But I just feel like the writing did let the character down a little bit because back and forth, back and forth.
Yes, and I think so. I'm going to plug something. For those who are interested, I believe it is the Cattleman Ranch series for like they're Harley Quinn romances, but like a lot of them focus on like Black families who are in ranching. And I feel like Barbara, that's what I wanted from Barbara. Like I wanted
Yeah.
that strong matriarch, she's been here. They've earned their position and she would understand where Isabel was coming from. Like I get being on the outside looking in, and this is
Mhm.
what you need to do. That's not what they gave us. That's not what they
No.
had time to give us. But it did make me want a series like that. So I'm just like
Mhm.
putting this out into the universe. If anyone has read those romances and enjoyed them, hit up the authors. Like or
Yeah.
one of them because I believe it's one of those like romance series where each book is written by a different author. I believe
Oh
Reese
wow, that's
Ryan
lovely.
wrote one. If I'm accurate, I'll have to look that up later. But again, someone knock on their door because it's the materials right there.
Yeah, listen, we're 3 episodes of Ride In. I would watch the heck out of a show like that, absolutely. I like you're right. I would have loved something like that from Barbara, like woman to woman kind of approach in or somewhat male dominated kind of industry. I would have really liked that, but some of the conversations just didn't line up for me. Yes, justice for Barbara, and that's a sentence I never thought I would have said.
But speaking about woman to woman, though, it is interesting now that we're having this conversation. All of the relationships between the ladies are a little tense, except for Isabel and Missy, now that I'm thinking about it, because Missy and Valeria are hitting and missing, depending on what we're
Hmm.
talking about. I think they're getting a bit more on track. And then I think everyone's just good with mom.
Yeah, yeah. No one got a problem
No
with mom.
one's got a problem with mom, but like as far as like their peers, the ladies aren't really getting along that much.
There's a lot of conflict. I do like the fact that there is a lot of unresolved conflict, but I know what you mean. I would like to see more of a that first flashback scene very much portrayed Valeria and Missy to have something of a strong relationship, and now it's kind of gotten buried underneath everything. This episode maybe had their most gentlest scene yet, where they had that nice conversation and they buried the shoes, and that was really, really nice. It was a
Mhm.
very vindicating moment for Missy, but it was also just nice to see Valeria be part of the family again. I while I don't like seeing them conflicted with each other, I feel like we could have maybe seen a bit more growth towards that moment because, like you said, it is very back and forth between them. So we've gone to a very like emotional bonding moment between the two, but I don't feel like there was any aftermath because that's what this was more. This is that scene was designed for more of Missy's storyline rather than actually focusing on their relationship. So I don't know if Missy will take that away with her and think Valeria really has grown. I really would like a moment like that just so that we could strengthen their friendship a bit more because Valeria hurt everyone by just disappearing. But now she's having bestie scenes with anyone except Tough, just to add to her own storyline with Tough. I will say, and we'll get to it later, I do love her friendship with Cash. It's very just dudes having a good time and just very relaxed, very chill, and they're so honest and real with each other. And I think that's why their relationship is one of my favorite on the show. Because in this show, not an awful lot of people are saying how they're really feeling, whereas that is just such an open book of a friendship, and I really, really like that.
Yes, I think this show really shines when it focuses on the friendships, the
Hmm.
dynamics they sing. Uh, for that scene with Valeria in Missy, it's also good because I think it's the only time Valeria gets to put the weight of things down. Because for the
Yeah.
entire episode, it's just nonstop her being shoved to the outside. I do appreciate that, even though that's happening, she is going forward and doing the things that need to get done. Like, okay, so the ranch hands and Tough don't see it for me, but I still need this idea that I have is the best idea. So I'll just get the water to the sheep myself. I'll work
Hmm.
it all by myself, which was sad, but I did appreciate that she is a go-getter. that she
Hmm.
is the like, okay, you said no, but that doesn't mean my idea is bad. I'm gonna go ahead and do it, and you'll just have to see. Like, fine, if you don't see it, I'll just show you the vision. I'll get the vision done and then bring you to it, and we'll do the thing that needs to get done.
Yeah, I liked her arc because it was like she didn't have to go out and prove herself, but she was going to do it anyway because she could, and she did in the end. Again, I would have liked maybe a like realization moment from Tough, but he's not ready to see her like that yet because he found those IDs at the end. It was like, who is this woman? So a lot of unresolved tension there, so we couldn't have had the episodic "you proved yourself" at the end of it. So I do get that, but I would have liked to have maybe seen some kind of like rewarding moment for her. Don't get me wrong, when she finished her job, it was like, whew, and stood there by the rail, and I was like, "You go, girl." But I would just like to see someone else acknowledge how hard she is trying. She is still keeping stuff, and that's a bit of a problem. We're gonna need to find out a bit more about that, because Tuff's reservations aren't wrong. He's just handling them all wrong. If that makes sense, the way the way they treated her, and they got all the ranch hands to treat her the same way, was a little bit network A is like, oh, this week we're going to treat you like this so you can prove us all wrong. Which is why maybe I just kind of I'm used to getting that moment of revelation at the end where they're like, oh, good job, good job. But we couldn't do that yet, obviously, because Valeria's still hiding stuff. Um, I again, maybe this goes back to the tough problem. I struggle with this arc because even though I do like it, the reason I struggle with this arc is because the show is making us root for Valeria, but it's by doing so, it's damaging Tough a little bit because we still don't know an awful lot about who he is, other than the fact that he's a good son, he's a good family member. We still don't know much about him, and it's making us root for her, even though the family do have an understandable reason to doubt her. So I'm kind of on the fence about where my allegiances are supposed to go. Like Valeria very much proved herself, and I know that she is not the villain of the story. Tough needs to see that, but he's not quite there yet. But it's villainizing Tough by making him behave villain of the week. Like, we're gonna make you prove yourself. I feel like there could have been more nuance in somewhere in that story, just so that it didn't go so by the numbers, if you know what I mean.
That makes sense. Like to speak about Reed's man.
Yep.
I feel like he would have enjoyed the detective aspect of in that last little bit. By the way,
Yep.
someone put Jake Foy in a lead role as a detective because
Yeah.
he has the range. It was really cool. But I feel like, it's the same issue we keep coming up with every episode. The his the drama surrounding him is not his own drama.
Hmm.
It's Valeria's drama that he is investigating, which means that he doesn't have his own story. Like we're not
Yeah.
really getting much about him. Like even the scene where we're seeing him as foreman, it's geared toward showing that he and the ranch hands aren't interested in her being in a leadership position.
Hmm.
In that, but doesn't necessarily show him. It shows him as a leader because he is directing them to do what they need to do. But it's like, okay, in all of this, how much do we know about Tough outside of, like you said, being a good son, being a good family member? I think he would be a good friend too. But I also want to like, what does Tough want? What
Yeah.
does Tough want to do? What is he interested in? Which we know is music. And he has Julian, I believe, is the man's
I looked
name.
up his name as well,
Yeah.
yes.
Which I wanted to stay with them. I think they were in the back of the pickup truck. um,
Yeah.
a little bit longer. Plus, because they had them in Golden Hour, and I wanted to sit in Golden Hour just a little bit more longer because it was beautiful. Uh, but you kind of got a sense of their dynamic,
Hmm.
because and you got to learn more about Tough that he's been out since he was 17. That this relationship that he's fostering with Julian is not his first, and he also got to be playful when he was like, "You're not special." And Julian laughed. And I said, oh, let's stay here actually, because I
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
know who Tough is outside of being a foreman and outside of being the good son of the McMurray family.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I have that down in my notes as a scene I was going to bring up as well. I thought it was an amazingly shot scene. I love it. You're right, Golden Hour. It brings out so many conversations, and I feel like the scene only scratched the surface of it. Um, Again, network. I was waiting on maybe the fact since they started talking about the the gala, and Tough was like, "Oh, you know how hard it is to get an invite to something like that, so you could never come." I thought, well, if this was a network TV show, the culmination of that arc would be that they found a way to bring him, and the Tough was himself, and that they enjoyed themselves in a society that might doesn't often see queer people represented that much. I thought, okay, maybe we could do this, but no, the conversation was all about Valeria. That was thrown in for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Like, I don't get me wrong, favorite part of the conversation, but it had no purpose to the rest of the episode. And I'm like, is that kind of a microcosm of Tufts' role in this show? He's there, but without a purpose. And I hate the sound of that. Like, at the end of the day, the McMurrays own the barn. Like, I'm sure this man could have like shown up and with Tough and would have had absolutely no problem. Um, yeah, I would have liked to have seen a bit more resolution. I know it's not that important in the grand scheme of things because they're still playing the long game with this relationship. But again, even the relationship between Tough and his man was all about what was going on with Valeria. Um, and then the conversation about the gala was all about what was going on with Cash or with Isabel or with just the McMurray family name. And I'm like, this man is on screen so much, and yet he has nothing to do other than run around after other people. Where's the justice in that?
It is not there. And I am trying to remember when it is that, he starts to be able to have eye conversations, because everybody else is doing it for the most part. Um, though I will say Isabel's kind of in that boat too. She's reacting to her kids a lot of the
Very true.
time. Or like we hear about her grief in connection to Missy's. Like that's
Hmm.
usually when we have that opening up. But one thing to fix that, and I think the way it's fixed with Isabel is she gets to talk to a family friend,
Hmm.
is we're Tufts friends. Like
Good point.
there's Julian you can talk to, yes, but he's also the love interest, which kind of limits conversations sometimes. To like either talking about their relationship or unfortunately in this case he's talking about his siblings instead of their relationship. But like that's I think a lot of times how friends service the plot is like you get to have you get to vent to the friend, and I think everybody else is venting. Cash is venting a lot. Missy is
Hmm.
venting a lot. I would like to see everybody else get to be like, I'm stuck and I would like to be able to talk about what I'm stuck in. Not that I
Hmm.
didn't appreciate Missy's story because I think that was a worthy one too.
Yeah. Is she, I feel like this episode was the one where everyone had to prove themselves. I'm not really sure why this poor family is in this predicament where they have to prove themselves, but like Missy also had something to prove in the same way that Cash did. Because she was asked to do the suicide dive by Frontier Jeans for a promo, and she couldn't do it because of the anxiety of the fact that she hadn't done it since that night. And I mean, like, there was depth in that storyline, and like you felt for her, you really did. Um, I like the fact that again, we've seen plots like this portrayed on TV before, so at least for the first half of it, I knew where it was going, and then the second half pleasantly surprised me in that she couldn't do it for the Frontier Jeans film crew, and then that awful woman was trying to tell her how to do her own talent, and I was like, Missy stood up for herself, and I was like, again, second time this episode. Deserved, absolutely deserved. Um, I like the fact that Missy stood up for herself because she's a very quiet, kind of slightly socially awkward kind of character when she's in a situation she doesn't know what to do, and it's understandable. She's never done any of this marketing stuff before. So I completely get that, but I like the fact that she actually took a moment to stand up for herself, and she actually told this woman, "No, well, that may be what you know, but this is what I know, and I could die if I wasn't in the right headspace to do this." And so she didn't do it. I'm like, I love this because it was all that awkward, like dancing around it, like, oh, let's just run the horse around in circles for a few times without actually doing it. I was like, okay, why is the scene going on for so long? And then she stood up to the woman in the end, and I was like, huge moment for Missy. Deserved that woman, deserved that comeback. And then she had that little arrogant, he's fired people for less. We don't know where it's going. Again, if this was on network TV, the culmination of that arc would have been that she finally found the courage to do it, but in front of people. I like the fact that she did it first thing in the morning when no one was watching, quietly at the end of the episode, just for nobody but her. I don't know if she's rung up Frontier Jeans. It was like, actually, I managed to do it in the end. But if this was like a TV show or a movie that's like of a bigger scale, like a Marvel show or something, that would have been just a little post-credit teaser that added nothing to the next installment. All it did was complement the character's arc, and I feel like that was so important because she finally found the courage to do something that had been bothering her, but she did it for her, not the film crew, and that was a huge moment for her.
And I like that this show takes the time to do things like that.
Yeah.
That it really is about, for a lot of the characters, about personal growth. And for Missy, it's about healing.
Hmm.
I think, and there, I love all the discussions about a headspace because it's such a dangerous sport. They do dangerous things. And that discussion she had with I'm actually not sure if she's like a PR person, the publicist, who she is. But it was the one that needed to happen because it is like athletes know their bodies and they know their minds, and you need to respect that because people
Hmm.
like she's right. I don't need to die for your ad shot. Like
Hmm.
that's not like time is money. That's correct. I do understand that point of the discussion because Missy could have said that on the phone and they wouldn't have been at the ranch. But the point is we're having a discussion now and she should not be doing it. And I'm glad that she didn't do it because that is in another show, if we were later in the season, that is how she falls off the horse and ends up in the hospital. We have the drama of the episode ending. Um, and it's not that. So I do appreciate that it was like know yourself. And no matter like if money is in the equation, you still need to shut things down. I think for some people, like as an audience watching, someone might have needed that message. You never know.
Hmm.
Someone might have needed that. To be like, you know what, she's right. Like even if it's not a life-threatening situation, I can't do something, and I'm not going to try to do something if it's not something in my wheelhouse or if it's not something I can do right now. So that was a word for somebody. I'm sure someone was like, I'm gonna go to job next tomorrow. And say that to the person who is constantly asking me to do things that I can't do yet.
Yeah, changing hearts and minds. That's what Missy does. And I'm so glad that she was it did have that moment because she is as someone who gets anxious about things and is afraid to say things and like gets all up in your own head about it. And you in this kind of sport, you cannot be up in your own head about things like that and then expect it to go on and carry on as normal. So it was huge for her that she was able to do that, and I was thrilled because these frontier jeans people, we're not getting the best vibes off them, and like they're forcing her into this, and then when she gets a big opportunity, like, oh no, you have to pull out of that. Um, and Missy's doing her own thing, and so she might be an unusual acquisition for them, but she is proving herself time in and time again. And I mean, like, we have to stand, we have to.
We do. And I just feel like Frontier needs to get on board with the standing because she's
Yeah,
worthy of
yeah,
it. I think though, I want to manifest if CW does pick up the show for season two is more trick riding. The suicide drag in well, Golden Hour should be like the subtitle of this episode because she did that during Golden Hour too.
yeah.
The suicide drag is gorgeous, and I would love to see more trick riding in the season
Hmm.
two.
Yeah, it's such a visual aspect of the show, and because they'd done it in the pre-credit scene in the pilot episode before we jumped time, you kind of forgot what it looked like. Like I know it's only been 3 episodes we're watching on a weekly basis, but you did kind of forget what it looked like. Just seeing it, the way it was shot as well, it makes for such a visual experience. And it like I know I said this already. It's like being that post-credit thing and bringing it in just in that last little tag of the episode. It was such a fulfilling moment, and I really, really liked it. I know I would love to see Missy get back at it and be herself and do it when she wants to do it and express herself in that way because that's who she used to be. And I feel like every episode she's finding her way back there. So yeah, more of that, please.
Yes. And then before we end the review though, two things. Um, love the dancing between Valeria and Cash.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
love
like
it.
you had said, it was like two buddies just cutting the rug. Well, in this case, cutting some dirt. As like after like a really tough day. It was a really tough
Yeah.
day. And they just I mean, I would not have been surprised if we started doing the shopping cart. Or like the shower thing because it was a lot of goofy fun dancing. It was not supposed to be serious. It really just them having a good time.
It was. And like after Cash being so like, I don't do dancing throughout the episode, having to do the waltz and everything like that. It was just nice to see him like let loose and just have a good time. Because these him and Valeria are characters who like they come off as though they know how to have fun, but I do think deep in their heads they judge themselves and they went through a lot of struggles in this episode. So I said it before, that's it's probably the realest relationship on the show and the one we get the least. So maybe that makes you appreciate it more when you do say it. But from their conversation before earlier in the episode when Cash was like, you don't need to do this. So they're like offloading at the end of a long day with a capital L. It was just such a nice moment, and it kept going on, and that was pleasantly surprising because I was like, you're just used to them fitting this in and quickly cutting, but it was just so nice just to sit and see them have the time of their lives with each other. And I love friendship so much. In another show that might have developed into more, who knows? But these characters have their own storylines going on, and it's just so nice just to see them being buddies. We don't see that enough on TV. I think real buddies.
There's so much joy, with exception to Tough in the doorway.
Yeah,
Detective Tough on the case.
watching from the corner.
No. But I mean, it is interesting though for Tough to be investigating to this degree.
Hmm.
It is strange that she has so many driver's license from different states with different names. I mean, that is really intriguing. I am so happy that you and Reed are on this ride.
Yeah.
It is it's so hard not to make the pun, but because I mean, hearing y'all's reactions to it has been fun. Like to see like how because it's a different show for us. Like it's
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really different. And it's a different show for the CW. So it is fun to see how the people are watching a show that you enjoyed.
Oh yeah, definitely. I have to say I really, really enjoyed watching it, and I am enjoying it on a weekly basis. I know when we knew the show was coming, I was like, this is an interesting acquisition for the CW. But like, I know you know a lot about me, and I do have a general cup of tea. But honestly, when it comes to television, I really don't have a cup of tea. I love giving everything a try to see if I like it. And I knew when I watched this, I was like, this is different, but I kind of like this different. And by episode two, I was hooked, line, and sinker, even with all the sheep talk. Um, I was just all in on it. And I love the character so much. I cannot wait to see where the story goes next. Um, it's different for me, but it's a good kind of different. I'm having the time of my life watching it.
Yay. Speaking of times of our lives, though, wild
Oh
cards.
yeah, it doesn't get more fun than
I
that.
know. I okay, I don't know how you feel about it, but it might be my favorite episode of the season so far.
Like, you know, I've said that about every single one I've watched so far, and this one is no exception to it. My goodness, did they not hold back with this one?
It is so fun. And I did though expect that Ellis had some undercover experience, but apparently not.
Yeah.
Like okay. But I mean it's just I really appreciated how Ellis and Max are really on the case. You know, like whenever they get into being able to investigate, their ideas of what to do are always so fun. But they also push the plot forward in terms of finding out what is happening within the case. And yes, that's the point of the episode. But we've watched so much television and some mysteries, and you know that sometimes the lead characters don't really aren't functioning the way you want to function in the show. And for them, they really do. They bring it home and bring the laughs. It was so funny.
It was. I have to say, this is the episode that was probably the wackiest, but at the same time, the most serious as far as undercurrents go. We went the most off the wall with storylines yet, but at the same time, we got to the crux of some of the center storylines going on in the background, and with some through some serious conversations. And I think that it got the balance just right. Obviously, on a show like this, it's going to lean towards silly a bit more, and that works for the show beautifully. Um, the whole like yes, we got to see Alice go undercover. I saw the promos. It was all about that. But we also got to see Max do what she does best as Marcy. And my goodness, did Vanessa own that role? Um, I tell you, between watching right from the off when we saw that, like we've seen the scene on the trailer all the time. Let's be honest, the scene with Alice running with the surfboard towards the water, seeing just Max and the chief go, oh my God, in slow motion. I was like, I'm going to love this episode. And like I that feeling didn't change the whole way. Every arc this thing tackled was bonkers but brilliant at the same time.
It's it is so great. And I think it's because it's there's just something about the lingering on a moment that really can bring the funniness.
Yeah.
I mean like, it is just it's supposed to be fan service, but it's
Hmm.
also used as a joke, but it also moves the plot forward. It's very smart writing. And like you're right about the undercurrent of seriousness too, because in the middle of all the wackiness, besides the seriousness of the case, excuse me.
Yeah.
Besides the seriousness of the case, we also got to learn that Ellis and Lee used to be close. And what happened on the case that got him demoted is the reason why they aren't anymore. And the story he tells Max about his brother was real.
Hmm.
Like, and it just felt, I was like, oh, he's his younger brother, his 10 years younger brother. I'm hurt even more. I'm just like hurt even more about what happened to him because it seemed like Ellis in some ways raised his brother.
Yeah. And that goes a long way in highlighting this episode because there were a lot of routes this episode could have taken, and I'm glad it didn't, because there was the whole idea of whether you don't believe Alice was, or you surely believe Alice was framed with those drugs. He wasn't really doing them or selling them or anything like that when they were found. And another show might have raised some doubts because then Max was like, "Wait, why aren't you calling it in when Alice found drugs?" And I was like, "Is this going to suggest that he's getting too close again and he has a thing for maybe drugs or something because he's not dealing?" It didn't go there because Alice then convinced her about how the way the law works that you need to have some evidence that there was a murder involved, and she was like, I gotcha. I was like, I love this partnership so much. She never once doubted him, even though there were opportunities in the story. If we're going on what network TV passed, there were opportunities in the story for her to doubt him, and she didn't. She listened to the story about his brother. She listened to his history with his partners. She listened to his history with the chief. And yet she was still on his side through and through, despite the fact they bicker, they argue, they some occasionally rub each other up the wrong way. And yet she's his most loyal supporter. I love it so much. And like this episode, it never gets old. It really doesn't.
It doesn't, which is why Alice needs to get on the we're partners train.
Yes. You see, when he
He's,
said we're not partners again, I was like, didn't we go over this last week?
I know, like, don't let this be a running theme, Ellis, because you clearly are partners. And Max is such a great support. It was great at the end of the episode, just to jump to the end, because she risks her life for the
Yeah.
case, and he has to save her. And she takes responsibility,
Hmm.
and she wants Lee to know, like, hey, it's not on him. Though I did appreciate that Chief Lee was like, he's the seasoned officer, so it's on him regardless, because that's true. She is the civilian. Ellis has to be the one who gets her to understand truly how dangerous these situations are. But it also opened the conversation. Like we got so many layers of characterization there. I mean, we already knew Max is a person who's very loyal. But
Hmm.
just to see it in action for Ellis again was just wonderful. And then to see that actually Chief Lee is more so protecting the community by keeping Ellis from being a detective because of whatever was going on. I really want to know how messed up Ellis must have been during this casework. Uh, that a by the books officer was going off the rails to the point that the chief that's close to him was like, no, I'm demoting you
Hmm.
because it's just too much. Like how bad was it? I really, really want to know.
I know we've said on this pod many times that flashbacks are a convenience of the narrative that we don't necessarily need, and this show certainly doesn't need them. However, I feel like if we do keep this storyline a bit of a secret, the longer it goes on, maybe in like a penultimate episode, an episode that has flashbacks to whatever did happen in Ellis's time on that case, and of course everything he was going through, it might really benefit the story because it would show you how he got to this point, how his life turned around in such a way. I think that might be beneficial. I'm not sure the show would do it, and I'm not even sure it's necessary because the show utilizes dialogue so well. But it's interesting to think about. Alice was obviously in a very, very dark place back then. And even though like he's not where he wants to be in his career now, he's in a different place now. So it would have been interesting to see how he made it from the point A to point B. But with someone like Max in his life, I'm sure that information is going to come out one way or another, and we're going to get it. But it is interesting to think about how a flashback could be serviced in a story like that.
It would be because I wouldn't want it to be the whole episode where we spend the
No, no, no.
episode a year prior, but I would, like to see elements of what it was that he was dealing with, in terms of obviously it was the grief from losing his brother, but like how he was navigating that in the workplace to the point where, his relationships, but he burned bridges. That's very
Hmm.
clear. Simmons and Yates have a field day just, ragging on him. Lee doesn't trust him. So like what exactly happened? I know Simmons gives some of the backstory. But I was like, Simmons, we don't really know you, sir. And you
Yeah.
and Yates still didn't really provide much to this case
Yeah.
in comparison to Max and Alice.
I like that we got to see at least Simmons reeled into the main storyline a bit because hopefully, I hope we just don't go back to cracking jokes at his expense after this because there was at least some kind of repair done to their friendship. It might never be what it was, but like they can get along again, which is important. So I just hope we don't revert. Yates, on the other hand, just comes off like a caricature. We need more from her. Like, she makes facial expressions when someone argues with her. She cracks silly jokes just to try to pull one over on other people. I feel like we could maybe have a wee bit more from her. So maybe we will get it at some point because we don't really know what role she plays in the overall story other than being Simmons's new partner. And the Chief now, for example, I thought he was shaping up to be a bit of a one-dimensional character as well. Um, because he keeps reverting back every week. It's, oh, you did kind of well, and then it's, who are you? Why are you here? You're not on our payroll. Um, so like, but this week we and Max got through to him, and we saw that he does think very highly of Alice. He's just trying to protect him. I love that. I really love that. Of course, it went back to next time knock. He was grumpy and all because that's who he is. It went back to that at the end for humorous purposes, but there is a character under there, and I hope we get to bring him out. We're doing the same thing with Simmons, probably even better with Simmons. I hope Yates is next because what is that character's purpose other than like I said, standing around and cracking jokes? Um, but this episode was probably the most beneficial for the ensemble cast because we know obviously Max and Alice are the two main characters, but they have to interact with some people other than themselves. Because I think my biggest concern with this episode was that when Alice was going undercover, it was going to separate him and Max quite a bit, and the show's strongest dynamic is theirs. So I was like, oh, don't know how to feel about that. But actually, no, they got to do a lot of it together between the stakeout. Max was like, I've waited my whole life for this moment. And then she was falling asleep. Love that for her. Alice was like, don't go in there. Max was like, sure thing, boss. And then, that's boring. Let's go on in there. We just got to see how, like, I was going to say how what such a wild card she is. That makes sense. It is wild cards after all. But like it's just such a unique partnership and it functions so well. And they are such opposites of each other. And I think that's why it works so well.
Yes, and I think also that there's great use of technology here to service. Like the scenes all seem to match up well in terms of they all were necessary. So like yes, we're spending a lot of time on the phone. But they service each other where well. Like you have a phone scene, but then you also have a scene where you're in the car, where they're in the car. They're talking
Hmm.
directly to each other. And it does pull Simmons in, which was good because it also Ellis had to ask for help. He
Hmm.
doesn't kind of I didn't really get the feeling from him that he likes doing that. But he
Yeah,
asked multiple times, and I believe in every case it was because he needed help with Max.
I think that's right. Yeah. It was just says a lot about he actually, I'm sure he thinks a lot of Max and he wouldn't admit that right now, but you saw in the end he was a little bit shaken by the fact that she could have been in some serious trouble.
Yes, which like yes, saved each other again because she saved him in the wine episode, which
Yeah.
was that last week? No, the week before
I
that.
yeah.
Um,
Um last week.
or last week.
I was at first I was like, no, 2 weeks ago, and it was last week.
Thanks. So she saved him last week at the winery, and he has now saved her. So we're a couple that saves each other, which is really nice.
Love
I mean,
it.
that's part of the dynamic for shows like this, but it is just nice to see that they're seeding it early and that the stakes of saving each other are pretty high. I mean, I was loving the scene when she's at the cliff. That CGI water got me. I was, I was because there's just something about television grade graphics that feels so comfortable and heartwarming. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't need to look amazing. It's not on streaming, but seeing the water there, I was like, that's not real.
I know
And
you could see the blur around her as well when she was looking over it. But you
it,
know what? I love network TV so
I
much for that
know.
reason.
Well, I was like, yes, this is network TV. This is what we're used to. Because it feels, everything doesn't have to be big budget. And there's just something
No.
about being able to keep the emotion and the high stakes of a scene, but also being a viewer who's like, I know she's not on the edge of this
Yeah.
cliff, but it's so lovely that you are giving me what you can to make it look like she is.
Right. And what even added to that was the fact that Max, throughout the whole harrowing situation, never once lost her Marcy accent. Not a single one. She was like, "Oh God, final words. I don't know what to say. Police." Just absolute the commitment to the character. We always say that she never takes things too seriously, but she does deep down, and I'm sure deep down she was taking that situation very seriously. But she was going to protect her cover right to the end. You know what? Respect because she pulled it off. I love that woman so much.
I know. Up until the scene with her, them wanting to stage a suicide, it was nothing but wacky. For
Yeah.
that is not, and it's just so delightful to see that. Like from the moment she enters, first it's a cranberry company that she has to infiltrate. Second, it's like talking to the, I guess, is she the lead secretary or the manager? I couldn't really figure out who
Yeah,
Kathy is.
I feel like she was at one point deputy manager and she thought she was going to be promoted and wasn't. So of course she hired the surfer to go and take out her new boss so that she could get the role because why the heck not, right?
No. And then the thing that gets them caught is that they couldn't resist being intimate one last time before they hit the road. And she's just in Max in the vent, just she's like, oh, I mean, it's kind of cute if there wasn't murder. I was like, girl, you don't climb your way out of this vent. Or I did appreciate though that Ellis was like, did you record it? And she's like, I'm on the phone with you. How am I recording this
And
entire
fine,
conversation?
finally, someone understands how technology works on television.
Yes, instead of like, oh yeah, I have it. How would she have gotten that? She's on the phone. But I mean, it just and there's the silliness of it. Like the she even goes to karaoke because it's part of the cover. She's
Oh,
deep
I
in it
love that
now.
so much. I love that. And all we needed to see was the loud noise and the karaoke sign above her. Why not? But yeah, the commitment. She never once stopped in that role. I actually kind of liked the friendship she was striking up with Kathy. So I was like, oh, come on, Kathy. Not you pointing a gun at your best new bestie. Come on now. So unserious. But yeah, and yeah, totally believable just because of you'd expect it from these characters.
Yes, and I mean the like you had mentioned before though the accent that really drawl that honey. Just like, well, I mean, I appreciate everything that you've done for us. And I'm like, girl, it's just it's like you would have thought Kathy would have picked up on it. It's
But
just
nope.
there's just no way.
No, I hate to say it. I kind of knew Kathy was going to play a major role. We always do CW Actor Watch. I knew Kathy was going to play a bigger role because that actress has played a lawyer, I think, on both Supergirl and Arrow in the past.
Okay.
So I was like, I know, yeah. So you're definitely going to have something bigger. And of course, Kathy did. I didn't expect Kathy to have such a like bad guy heel turn, but I mean, like. She was we say about how committed Max was. Kathy was committed to getting that job, but nothing was going to stop her. Not even murder, apparently. Um, but I mean, like, yeah, such a goofy world of characters. Yeah, totally believable.
Yes, she's my favorite villain so far, I believe.
Yeah, me too. Me too. The desperation, just do it. Yeah,
And then she like I think that's Chili, right? The surfer who
yeah.
she gets mad at him and he's like, I love you too, Kathy. As they're leaving. It's like, no, you were serviceable for Kathy. She was gonna like leave with the money and you would never have heard from her again, sir.
Meanwhile, Kathy was like, "You idiot!" Oh God, what a dynamic.
I know. Which speaking of dynamics though, Alice and Max at the end of the episode.
Hmm.
That I love the boat scenes between them. I like that he tried to check in with her, which she did. She did appreciate that, but it is interesting that that is a wall for her.
Hmm.
We don't emotionally like spew our feelings, apparently, in terms of things that hurt us, which brought me back to the scene where she immediately wanted to shut Ellis down about her parents.
Hmm.
And it's like, Max, are you an avoider? Are you a bottler? Because I'm hearing bottling tendencies. If we're it's just like, I move on. I was like, you move on? Do you?
Hmm.
Or does it just sit in the back?
I did wonder about that as well because it felt like she was kind of brushing it off for his sake. But I'm like, okay, but we've seen this before where a character brushes it off so that the person around them won't feel bad about it. But actually, it has stayed with them. Again, this is network TV, so I don't know if we'll just move on to an adventure of the week next week. But I do feel like there will be that moment where she will something will resonate with her that oh my goodness, this could have happened. I mean, she does take things seriously, but maybe that it's not as fun as I was expecting it to be. In the same way as kind of like the stakeout, for example, she was like, this is not as fun as it's portrayed on TV because she was falling asleep. I feel like with much more serious consequences, like she did experience that in this episode where something could have gone horribly wrong. Thankfully, it didn't. Um, but I did like the fact that Alice is like frosty. He's getting less. He's thawing out the more the season goes on. But there was definitely a warmth there in the way he tried to kind of look through her. It was like, "Are you sure you're okay?" With kind of like a warm smirk on his face, just to let her know that he was there if she needed him. She didn't take the option because she kind of deflected it, and then again made it all about him so that she could teach him some dance moves. And I mean, like that's Max in a nutshell. And again, the episodes end in the most unusual of ways, just that nice little fade out and then cut and it's gone. It's so nice. I feel like after we always say the show's quite unserious, but it does deal with some relatively heavy topics. So after a case of the week, it's always nice to just blow off some steam with a fun, laugh out loud kind of moment. And they did it again very, very well.
And it was our second dance.
Yes, it
They
was.
danced in Ride and Max danced in Wild Cards. And I love the inclusion of Mark too. Because Alice was like, I didn't invite you. She's like, Mark did. And she just has the food. And I think the dancing, how they see those in shows. At some point, we're going to see Alice dance. And
Yeah.
it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah, it's going to happen. I was like, I don't know if it might be too soon to see it now, and it was, but it's definitely going to come back up at some point. I was obsessed with the fact that Max was like, oh, don't worry, Mark's not watching it. We cut off, and Mark was literally looking off in the opposite direction. I was like, this cat is an actor. I loved it so much. Um, uh, but I was getting very disappointed throughout this episode because my one criticism was going to be we haven't had a Mark sighting yet. But then he showed up at the end, and I was so happy. Oh yeah, I couldn't love this episode more. It ticked all the boxes for me.
I know. I mean, so it's 8 episodes or 10. I can't remember.
I want to say 10, I think.
Okay. So, well then, yeah, it's 10 then because that makes sense for the next episode because Alice's ex is in town.
Ah, yes, yes. I saw the promo
Yes.
last night.
Fun. This is gonna be fun. Max looked so intrigued though. Like
Dead.
she was very much like, hmm. So do y'all have a little thing going on back there?
Yeah, I loved it. She was like the child in the back of the car, like watching the parents go back and forth. She was just so intrigued by this dynamic. But we've seen this before. I keep saying that. I love the show. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's using the wheel in new ways. Um, we've seen this before where the new partner is kind of intrigued by an old partner, but maybe halfway through the episode they feel a certain kind of way about it, and then they have to reconcile with that. And I'm like, is this the episode where Max is going to feel a certain kind of way about this? I mean, this show keeps surprising us. I feel like this could happen, but at the same time, I totally buy out if it didn't.
True, but I think they'll do it, but it won't be because of romantic feelings. I think it would be because Ellis might listen to his ex. He
Mm,
doesn't always listen to Max in the field.
yeah, it's true. And they could hide behind the fact that Max doesn't like being pushed out by his old work partner or someone he can work well with. So we could always do that she doesn't like being pushed out of the work bubble. But maybe now and then in about 6 seasons when we look back on it, we're like, oh no, that was foreshadowing that she didn't like being pushed out of his life in general.
No, like underline work, work. This is a work discussion. I am mad at you because of work.
Yep. Keep telling yourselves that, besties.
All right, well, we should end here for wild cards. I felt like it's just so great to be on this journey with the show. And you notice we laughed through the entire pod about the episode. Usually we're laughing because of the things that we say, but it is a lot about
Yeah.
the episodes. And I think it's just so good that the TV is just so feel good.
Oh, very much so. I love these shows and I love Wildcard so much. It's so take a drink every time someone says unserious. It's so just bonkers and off the wall, and just to be able to sit and back and chill out and enjoy watching it and then enjoy our conversations about it. I mean, that's what television's all about, and this show understands that. 101, 100%. It just gets it down to the ground. I cannot believe we're approaching the halfway of that season. I do not want us to approach the halfway of that season, but at the same time, I cannot wait to see where it goes from here because this was the episode it definitely started to delve into that backstory. And I guess it's only going to get more as it goes on. So yeah, I'm in this show for the long haul because once we saw the trailer, we knew it was going to be a good one, but I love it so much.
I know. It's just been so good. But y'all, we're gonna wrap here. Thank you for
Hmm.
watching. Michael, we have to do the thing. So for those who don't know, if you
Oh yeah.
hadn't seen our tweet about it, we are going to move to video only, so we won't be uploading the audio to be listened to. It just works out better for us to be able to do video, and it's where I believe most of you are. So that is where you can find us. You can find us on YouTube. We are at the CW Spiral. And that is where all of our video content lives. If you listen to us react to things, it's over there. If you listen to us give our opinions about music, about the TV that inspired us, really just TV in general, it is all living in that space, and you can find those videos over on YouTube.
Yeah, if you spent the last 2 years, I cannot believe I'm saying 2 years. If you spent the last 2 years listening to us, you can now spend the next two watching us because we just, video seems to work out so well for us. We love what we do. We love uploading our episodes to YouTube, and it feels like we're, like Sabrina said, where we get the most engagement and where we want to place our focus going forward. So we're still here. If you, like I said, if you've been listening to us, you can find us over on YouTube instead. But yeah, we're not going anywhere. Prepare for more
Mm-mm.
laughs, more CW madness, and prepare for me to just completely go lose it when Superman and Lois season 4 comes out. That's all in your future, I promise you.
Yes. So thank you guys for watching We're the CW Spiral. I'm Sabrina.
And I'm Michael.
We'll see you Reed next week, y'all. Bye.
Bye.